What is up, guys? Today we're gonna learn how to play Jiaoqiu, the new limited 5-star character in the second half of the 2.4 version. He is a Nihility Support that can apply a lot of debuffs. Of course, my first thought is, will he be a good support for Acheron? Let's find out by going through his kit, starting from his talent. So every time he attacks an enemy with any of his attacks, he will apply a vulnerability debuff called Ashen Roast. So yeah, basically he's gonna talk shit to them. This debuff is unremovable and makes enemies take more damage. At 1 stack, enemies will take 15% more damage at level 10, and each additional stack adds 5% and is capped at 5 stacks. So enemies can take up to 35% more damage. This vulnerability debuff is actually very good. It's better than the defense reduction debuff, given the same conditions. But that's not all. When enemies have this debuff, they will take fire DOT damage at the start of each turn. Next, his skill also applies another stack of Ashen Roast. It's a blast type attack, so it can also hit adjacent enemies. But the primary target you select is the only one that gets the additional debuff. So the primary target gets 2 stacks of Ashen Roast, and the adjacent ones only get 1 stack, as shown here. His ultimate costs 100 enemy and is an AoE attack. It assigns all enemies Ashen Roast stacks to the highest amount present on field, and creates a zone that lasts 3 turns. This zone is another type of debuff that causes enemies to take more ultimate damage, and every time an enemy takes action, there is a 60% base chance that they will take another stack of Ashen Roast. This can happen a max of 6 times, but it can only trigger once per enemy turn. Moreover, if this zone is still active, any enemies entering battle will also get inflicted with Ashen Roast, and the amount of stacks will depend on the highest amount of Ashen Roast stacks recorded while the zone was active. So yeah, this is a lot of debuffs applied. If that's a bit confusing to understand, let me show you an example. So here, I just entered battle, and no one has any Ashen Roast stacks. I use my skill on this enemy, so now it has 2 Ashen Roast stacks, and the ones next to it has 1. The leftmost enemy still has 0 stacks. Now, I activate my ultimate, so one of the enemies now has 3 stacks thanks to my talent. And since 3 is the highest amount of stacks applied, my ult now applies 3 stacks to everyone, like so. Now, it is the next wave. Since 3 stacks was the highest recorded so far, all enemies in this wave now has 3 stacks. I do a basic attack on the middle enemy, so now it has 4 stacks. Now, when it takes a turn, the zone applies 1 stack to it. As a result, the middle enemy now has 5 stacks of Ashen Roast, and the ones next to it still has 3. Which I can verify by checking the enemy's status, like so. I almost forgot about his technique. It just creates a field around him, and when you enter a combat, it applies 1 stack of Ashen Roast to all enemies and does a little bit of fire damage, like so. That's it for his kit. You can see that his damage may not be very high, but the real value is the amount of debuffs he can apply in a short time, and they also last a while. So how do we build him? I think if you pair him with Acheron, you can go with 2-piece Pioneer Diver and 2-piece Hacker Space. But if you want to place him in a DOT team, instead of 2-piece Pioneer Diver, you can go for 2-piece Prisoner or Musketeer instead. 4-piece Musketeer can also work, but I'd rather go with the 2-piece sets I mentioned. As for planar sets, you can use the Vonkwax set if you use him with Acheron, or the Pan Cosmic set if you use him in a DOT team. For main stats, I would go Effect Hit Rate Body, Speed Boot, Attack Percent or Fire Damage Sphere, and ER Rope. I'd aim for at least 140 Effect Hit Rate and at least 147 Speed, but ideally 161, and the rest into Attack. As for Light Cones, just try and get his signature. It's really good on him. It even has an extra debuff you can apply when you attack enemies that cause them to take even more damage, lasting for 2 additional turns. Also, to get the full effect of this light cone, you need the wearer to apply DOT, so a character like Pella cannot really use this. If you don't have that, you can try Eyes of the Prey, or before the tutorial mission starts, but you'll need some defense reduction to help, like from Pella. For Eidolons, E1 is very good. Not only you'll do more damage when attacking an enemy inflicted with Ashen Roast, but Jiaoqiu's talent now applies 2 stacks instead of 1. E2 is useful if you want to play him in a DOT team, because he'll do more damage. At E2, if you run him with 4-piece Prisoner, it is actually not that bad, because you will permanently have 3 DOT, with Kafka's Shock, Black Swan's Arcana, and Jiaoqiu's Ashen Roast. E4, it's alright. I don't think it's very useful though. Finally, E6 is a banger, like always. Defeating an enemy transfers Ashen Roast stacks to the enemy with the lowest amount of stacks. So back when I had a problem with some enemies having 0 stacks, now it's not really a problem. I also have a max amount of Ashen Roast stacks increased to 9, so enemies will take even more damage. And remember, damage vulnerability is better than defense reduction, so this is very useful. As for team comps, I definitely pair him with Acheron. So I would go Acheron, Jiaoqiu, Pella, and a sustain like Aventurine. But if you have E2 Acheron, you can replace Pella with Sparkle. For a DOT team, I would go Kafka, Jiaoqiu, Black Swan, and Huohuo. But okay, I'ma just be real, I would not play a DOT team with him unless he is E2, because I think Rame is still better when Jiaoqiu is below E2. So here's a showcase with him with Acheron. Alright, that's it for my guide. The highlight of his kit is basically that he is Acheron's best teammate. The amount of times he can apply debuffs is crazy, but let me know what you guys think about him, and if you're pulling him or not. And if I missed anything, I'll leave it in a pinned comment below. Alright, that's it. See ya.